At the beginning of the movie, we are introduced to a man named Puek. Puek is a former street boxer, but after his mother died, he became unfocused and chose to leave his boxing career. His mother was a drug dealer who was forced into that life to support the family. However, this made Puek often the subject of ridicule at school. As he grew older, Puek lived in a slum area inhabited by gangsters, drug dealers, and prostitutes. Soon after, Puek stopped at a small shop to buy a milk soda, but at the same time, a man suddenly insulted him. Initially, Puek was able to hold his patience despite the insults. However, when the man insulted his late mother, Puek immediately beat him up. Fortunately, Puek's girlfriend arrived and separated them, trying to take Puek away. Unfortunately, as Puek was about to leave, the man called his mother a prostitute. This enraged Puek even more, and this is what happened. As a result of killing the man, Puek was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, he did not feel guilty at all, as the person who dared to insult his mother deserved to die. Upon arriving, Puek was taken to the warden's office, along with a new inmate named Fluke. It was known that Fluke was a transgender woman who usually worked in Bangkok, but since she still had a male body, she had to serve her sentence in the men's prison. Then, Puek and Fluke were interrogated by the warden, who asked why they ended up in prison. Puek explained that he killed someone because that person had insulted his late mother. As for Fluke, she was accused of being a drug dealer, even though she hadn't done anything wrong. Hearing all of this, the corrupt warden suggested that they behave well in this prison, as it was the most brutal prison in Thailand. Furthermore, they would be placed in Block A, which had a reputation for being very dangerous. However, Puek was unwilling and asked to be moved to another cell. This angered the warden, who immediately punished him. Reluctantly, Puek accepted the decision. The warden then took them to meet the prison's gang boss, Beer. He was the ruler of Block A, highly influential in the prison, as he conspired with the warden. Here, Beer immediately bullied Puek and Fluke, who appeared weak in his eyes. Before being placed in Block A, Puek and Fluke had their hair shaved completely. In this prison, newcomers were not allowed to stand out or act tough. That night, Puek and Fluke were placed in Block A, under the leadership of Beer. As mentioned earlier, Beer was a cruel man who wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone who disobeyed his orders. Here, Beer asked his right-hand man to bring Puek and Fluke to him since they hadn't been introduced yet. When approached, it turned out that Puek and Fluke were already sleeping. The right-hand man roughly woke them up. However, only Fluke woke up, while Puek was difficult to rouse, even after being stepped on. His ability to sleep was extraordinary. Then, the right-hand man brought Fluke to Beer. There, Beer explained that there were rules in Block A that no one could defy. The rule was simple. New prisoners had to obey every command of Beer. Anyone who refused would be beaten senseless by the other inmates. After that, Beer asked Fluke to perform an act on him because his sword hadn't been sharpened in a while. Since there were no women in the prison, Fluke, as a transgender woman, became his target. With tears of fear, Fluke reluctantly complied, even though other inmates watched. While Fluke was serving Beer, the right-hand man gave Puek a lesson for being so hard to wake up. Puek was then immediately attacked by all the inmates in Block A. The next day, all inmates from Block A and Block B gathered for lunch in the dining hall. Here, we are shown that Block B was led by a man named Gus, with his deputy Farang. Unlike Block A, the prisoners in Block B had a sense of family values and didn't like causing trouble. They wanted to invite Puek to move to Block B because they lived in the same city. However, moving to another block wasn't that simple. Soon after, Puek went to get food with his face severely bruised. Unfortunately, only a little food was left, and it was barely edible. When he tried to find a seat, the right-hand man of Beer approached and kicked his food. At that moment, Puek was furious and wanted to fight back. However, he tried to hold back, as causing trouble would keep him in prison longer. Seeing this, Farang, the deputy of Block B, felt sorry for Puek. However, Gus told Farang not to intervene yet, as it could cause big problems. Some time later, Puek was taking a shower with other inmates. In this prison, all activities were done together, not just during prayers. Soon after, Puek was surrounded by Beer and his crew. Beer explained that showering here wasn't free, and Puek would have to pay. Puek replied that he had no money and didn't know what to pay with. Hearing that, Beer ordered him to kneel as payment. After Puek knelt, Beer still wasn't satisfied. He forced Fluke to kick Puek with all her might. However, Fluke refused because she couldn't bear to hurt her friend. As a result, Beer turned on Fluke instead. To avoid further punishment, Fluke reluctantly obeyed, though her kick was weak. Then, Beer ordered his right-hand man to kick Puek in turn. With arrogance, the right-hand man claimed that Puek would surely beg for his mother. Hearing the word mother made Puek furious. He didn't mind being insulted or bullied, but he would not tolerate anyone insulting his mother. When he tried to fight back, he was again beaten by the other inmates. After the beating, Puek passed out helplessly. Here, he dreamed of the past when he was participating in a teenage boxing competition. After the match, Puek came home and was treated by his mother. She asked him not to box anymore because it would hurt his body. But Puek replied that without boxing, they would struggle to eat. Boxing helped him support his mother. He promised that one day he would make his mother happy, even if it meant hurting himself. The most important thing was that his mother would stop being a drug dealer, a job he hated. Soon after, we see Puek still unconscious in the shower room. Shortly after, the warden poured water on him, waking him up. The warden then ordered Puek to quickly line up with the other prisoners. After the warden left, Fluke came to give Puek an orange. Fluke wanted to apologize because she had to kick him earlier under Beer's orders. Puek understood and didn't mind at all. In the yard, the warden told Beer that Fluke had just given Puek an orange. Hearing this, Beer immediately started beating Fluke mercilessly. Seeing Fluke being beaten, Puek immediately challenged Beer to a duel. He was determined to fight back against Beer's excessive brutality. However, before the fight could start, Farang stopped them. Farang said that Puek had already been badly beaten, and it wouldn't be fair for him to duel Beer. To replace Puek, Farang was ready to fight Beer. If he won, Puek and Fluke would be moved to Block B. Meanwhile, Gus, the leader of Block B, was not going to stay silent. He made a deal with Beer, allowing Puek to move to Block B, but Fluke had to stay in Block A. Beer agreed to the deal because, in truth, he was too afraid to fight Gus, who was known to be extremely brutal. That night, Puek moved to Block B. Here, Gus and Farang asked why Puek hadn't slept, but Puek asked them why they wanted to help him. Gus explained that he didn't like seeing someone being tortured like Puek. However, there was a misunderstanding between Puek and Farang that almost led to a fight. In the end, Puek apologized and thanked Gus and Farang. From now on, he promised to serve Gus and Farang. He would remember this moment as his turning point in prison. Meanwhile, Beer continued to torment Fluke, who always refused to serve him. That night, Beer ordered Fluke to sleep on the cold, dirty floor without a mat. She was treated like an animal. Time passed, and we saw Puek growing closer to Gus and Farang. They were strong leaders, kind-hearted and full of solidarity, unlike Beer, who was cruel, cunning, and inhumane. A few months later, Puek's girlfriend visited him. He was happy because he missed her dearly. Unfortunately, her visit wasn't just to check on him. She brought news that she had been arranged to marry another man, someone much wealthier than Puek, and, of course, not a criminal. She apologized, saying it was her parents' decision. She also couldn't wait for Puek to finish his 10-year sentence. Upon hearing this, Puek could only cry and beg her to cancel the arranged marriage. But it was too late, and Puek had to accept the bitter reality. At the same time, Gus was visited by his father, who looked like a religious man. It was no wonder he was named Gus. During this moment, his father asked Gus to seek treatment and behave well to be eligible for parole, especially after serving 10 years. However, Gus was disappointed when his father said that if Gus was released, he would have to move south and live with his aunt, while his father chose to stay with his new wife. Gus felt that his father didn't want to live with him. Meanwhile, Puek saw Farang fighting Beer and 2 of his men. Puek immediately rushed to help. The commotion stopped when the guards blew their emergency whistles. When everyone was lying down, Gus came and laid next to Beer. Gus asked what Beer really wanted and why he was always causing trouble with his gang. Beer responded that he wanted to fight Gus's gang to become the only ruler. Though he was hesitant, Gus eventually agreed to Beer's challenge, and they agreed to fight on the upcoming Saturday. That night, Fluke was woken up by Beer's right-hand man. Again, Fluke was forced to serve him while other prisoners watched. Fluke, who considered herself not a cheap prostitute, refused, but the right-hand man continued to pressure her, threatening her. In reality, such things often happened in every prison. The concept of prisons was inherently flawed. Wouldn't gathering evil people together just create worse evil? As Fluke was being assaulted by the inmates, she remembered her past with her lover. They had been staying together at Fluke's place, when suddenly her lover went to buy some drinks. Unexpectedly, her lover had set her up as a drug dealer, even though it was her lover who was actually dealing drugs. Fluke was arrested that same night. Now, Fluke could only lie helplessly after being assaulted by dozens of inmates. Meanwhile, Beer and his crew arrived. They immediately took out a cutter knife, seemingly to use it as a weapon against Gus's gang. The next day, the prisoners had lunch peacefully, unlike usual. But for Block B, peace was just normal. As a leader, Gus set an example of sharing. Soon after, Fluke approached Puek and suddenly grabbed his food. Fluke ate all of it, which made Puek wonder what had happened. It turned out that Fluke had eaten Puek's food because she knew Beer had poisoned it. Fluke died instantly. Upon learning this, Puek was enraged. Here, Gus approached Beer and called him a treacherous man without honor for secretly poisoning the food. Unable to stand Beer's behavior any longer, Gus advanced their battle. The next day, on the day of the battle, Gus noticed that Puek was quiet since Fluke's death. He felt guilty because Fluke had sacrificed herself for him, even though Puek had never helped her properly. Gus said there would be a war between the blocks, and here Puek could unleash his anger on Beer. In the afternoon, Gus and his group waited for Beer's gang to come to the battlefield, dressed in prisoner uniforms similar to soldiers. Gus couldn't wait to destroy all the inhumane inmates of Block A. When Beer's group arrived, the battle began immediately. However, the fierce battle was stopped when the guards arrived. Seeing the chaos, the warden threatened to add another year to anyone who caused trouble again. That night, when the Block B prisoners were sleeping, Farang and Puek noticed Gus looking very pale. They suspected Gus had been seriously wounded. Indeed, there were many stab wounds on his body. Panicked, they tried to find some medicine. With no other options, Puek and the other prisoners screamed for help from the guards. Unfortunately, no guards came. Meanwhile, Gus, who was dying, asked Puek to stop because he had already given up. Gus said that night was his last. He only asked Puek and Farang to protect the prisoners of Block B and take revenge on Beer, as it was Beer who had secretly stabbed him. Shortly after, Gus passed away, leaving Puek and all the prisoners heartbroken. The next day, Gus's father, a religious man, came to the prison. Filled with anger and sadness, he came to collect his son's body. He blamed the warden for his negligence, saying that Gus was about to be released, but was instead taken by death. At the same time, Puek and Farang went to Beer while he was showering. Without hesitation, they beat up the inmates blocking their way. However, Beer calmly asked if Gus had passed away. Filled with emotion, Puek challenged Beer to a one-on-one duel until one of them died. Of course, Beer accepted the challenge, but he insisted that the duel should involve knives. Without wasting any time, Puek and Farang immediately sharpened their knives. Farang asked why Puek wanted a one-on-one duel instead of a full-blown battle. Puek replied that if they fought a battle, the guards would most likely intervene before they could kill Beer. But with a duel, he had a great chance to kill him and avenge Fluke and Gus. Shortly after, Puek, Farang, and their crew arrived at the toilet where the duel would take place. Farang asked all the inmates to be silent and not to interfere with the fight. Then, without any more words, Puek and Beer began their fight. During the fight, Puek was scratched by the knife on his arm, but with his boxing skills, he easily turned the tables. In the end, Beer was killed by Puek's hands. The gangster boss who had acted so tough was actually nothing. After Beer died, the guards came and immediately secured the area. As a result of the murder, Puek and Farang were moved to solitary confinement. Later, they were visited by the warden, who gave them food. The warden explained that it was their last day in this prison. Soon, they would be transferred to a much harsher prison, filled with dangerous criminals. Naturally, this was a punishment for Puek and Farang for openly killing Beer. Puek then asked, if Beer had killed Fluke and Gus, why wasn't he punished? The corrupt warden answered that Beer had committed his murders very cleanly and without causing any disturbances. This was the bitter truth that Puek and Farang had to accept. They were more convinced than ever that the world was indeed unfair. Afterward, Puek and Farang were transferred to 2 different prisons. At this point, Puek had given up and had to live his new life. He knew he couldn't go back to his old life. All he could do now was move on, letting go of the deaths of his mother and 2 friends. And the film ended. This film teaches us that the world is indeed unfair,